The America's Democrats podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, is made possible by contributions from our listeners. Want to do more? Go to americasdemocrats.org and click Donate. And thank you for allowing us to be your voice. And if you enjoy the show, please share it with your friends on Facebook and Twitter, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. This is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. This week, Jim Hightower and Senator Sherrod Brown on why this is a pivotal moment for progressive politics in America. Plus, we remember a progressive hero, Don Fowler. Had enough of Fox News, the House Freedom Caucus, and Donald Trump? If you want the facts that you won't get from them or from the fake news sites of the alt-right, then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Every other Tuesday, 21st Century Democrats co-founder Jim Hightower sits down with a new guest for his own podcast titled Hightower Chat and Chew. His most recent guest was Senator Sherrod Brown, and together they took on how progressives can get the most from a Biden administration.
Howdy-ho, America. Jim Hightower here, back with another Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour on Facebook, talking about all sorts of populist-style issues of what's happening to regular people and how the powers that be are running roughshod over the powers that ought to be. The workaday people of this country, the consumers, the small business folks, just the average people of our country. And here we are, post Joe Biden election, just certified by the Electoral College, much to the amazement of Donald Trump and Bill Barr and other creeps. So there he is. Biden is in office. And so we have Biden, and we being largely progressive forces in this country. Black Lives Matter, labor unions, farm groups, people responded. And they cast the orange menace out the White House office window. But now we've got Biden. So what? What do we have? And what do we do? Having him doesn't mean that progress has descended upon us. It means that we have to get busier than ever. So how do we get the most out of Joe? And that's what we want to talk about with y'all tonight. So all of you folks all across the country. And by the way, we're joined no longer just with our Facebook crowd, you rough and rowdy regulars out there, but also we're now screaming and screening out there on Free Speech TV. This is an amazing resource that a lot of people don't know about. It is a television network that reaches out primarily to places that do not get cable. So we're talking about Bismarck. We're talking about Bogalusa. We're talking about Bartlesville. We're talking about the country out there that is called the flyover country. This TV network reaches 40 million people out across America that normally don't get heard from and don't get their news from the establishment sources. So, hello, here we come. We want to hear from you. So tune in and call in too. Visit with us. Deanna, as always, Deanna, the disembodied voice of Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour, is always there to receive your comments and direct them toward us. And tonight, we've got somebody to help us think through what we have with Biden, but more importantly, what we have to do as a democracy, as regular people. How do we make America work again for us? Not make America great, but make America work for ordinary workaday people. And that would be Senator Sherrod Brown. Sherrod and I actually go way back. He was elected, he was the state representative. And then I think it was 82, wasn't it, Sherrod, that I think you were elected to be the Secretary of State
That's when we first met. Yep.
In the great state of Ohio. And in that same year, I was elected, much to the amusement of the people of Texas, to be the agriculture commissioner of our state. And I linked up with people like Sherrod, also Byron Dorgan out of North Dakota, who was a state official at that time, and we had this little network of crazy lunatics who were trying to think, well, maybe we could make the world a little bit better if we all teamed up. And Sherrod Brown has been one of those who has always teamed up with us over the years. And Sherrod, you. I just want to say that, I mean, this he's not just another pretty face, as you can see. This is a guy. This is a U.S. senator who has stood up for regular people. From I believe you're from Central Ohio, right?
From North Central. All
right, but a rural, small town.
Yeah, small city. Grew up working on a family farm. And when you were elected ag commissioner in Texas, it was way bigger news than my getting elected Secretary of State of Ohio. I mean, it was big news when Texas produced Jim Hightower in elective office. So thanks. I love what you said. Powers that be, powers that ought to be. So you're exactly power that ought to be. So thanks for that.
Well, let's talk about that because, all right, you're a Biden supporter, and I, as a overt maverick populist muckraker, talked to through a group of Noam Chomsky and others of us who went on and said, all right, Biden is a corporate sort of candidate, a corporate Democrat, but we have to do this because Trumpism means we fight nothing but defensive battles. We can't move our progressive agenda forward. So, at the time I said that, I didn't care if he was a 200-pound sack of concrete. We were going to carry Biden into the White House. And now we have him there. So what do we do? How do you think we make him better than he thinks he can be?
Well, I tell you why I'm optimistic. First, thanks, Jim, for doing this show. And Deanna, who's making this show run, she has roots all the way back to Akron, Ohio, and Logan, Ohio. So,
how about that?
That school makes me. If I'd known that, I'd been on the show earlier, Jim. So thank you. I look at it this way. A year ago, Joe Biden was not. Joe Biden was planning to restore the country back to pre-Trump normalcy. Then the pandemic hit. Then he got legs in this campaign. I think that Joe Biden has a chance now. I think he knows that he can be a very consequential president, not just restore the country to, what it was before Trump, because it wasn't a good economy for much of America. We know that it wasn't a just justice system, all the things that we know to be true. But Biden has recognized that, and I think he's, from some of his cabinet appointments, from what I think he's going to do right from the start, I think he understands that he's got to do big consequential things on the issues of climate, on the issues of structural racism, on all about wealth equality or inequality. I think that we're going to see a president that's going to think big. I think he's going to come out with strong executive orders to undo a lot of the Trump stuff. Also, for instance, one of them will be to restore the overtime rule. So 5 million Americans will get the overtime pay that they earn every day or every week or every month or every pay period. So I understand he's had a pretty moderate career, but he's a guy that is going to, I think he's going to rise to the occasion of the times. And these times demand something kind of Rooseveltian. I think he could, these are my words, not his, but I think he can think of himself as LBJ or FDR. Winning those 2 Georgia seats will play a big role in that. But even without them, and I think we can win them, but even without them, we can do big things.
But don't we have to goose him up? I mean,
we had to goose Roosevelt up. I mean, colloquially,
exactly.
We have 3-2. Yeah, I mean, they used to say, I've heard you say this many times, and the Roosevelt quote, okay, I agree, meeting with all these progressives, whatever they were calling themselves in those days. And he said, okay, I agree with you. Now make me go do it. Right. And it's up to us. It's up to us to organize and push and do what you do in this show all the time, Jim.
Well, Roosevelt actually said, go out and make me do it. That meant go out to the country. Go out to the countryside, not rely on lobbyists, not rely on the media, but the people themselves. Go out and organize. And isn't this the perfect time really to do political organizing in 2021 when you're not pushing candidates? We could be door to door on people's doorsteps talking about issues. And if you talk about those issues, including health care for everybody, healthcare for everybody, a Green New Deal, as bold and audacious as the original FDR version of the New Deal, civil justice reform, et cetera. People, if you go talk to them on the porches, they actually agree with these things. Even in red areas of America, they agree with them. And now when we can go out and talk to them without saying, vote for this person, that's an opportunity for the best time to do politics is when you're not doing, quote, politics, and inspire those people to put pressure, not just on Biden, but on the Congress to say step forward.
Yeah, look at some of these initiatives around the country. The minimum wage,
exactly,
$15 is passed by big margins, even while Trump was winning a state, even though Trump, of course, opposed
in Florida.
In Florida, for instance, some civil justice reform in Florida passed with an overwhelming number. I mean, voters are way more progressive than most politicians think they are. I mean, that's why I get elected in Ohio, because they know I fight for those kinds of issues for workers and for consumers and for family farmers. And if you don't, if you use the term flyover country, if Democrats nationally would understand that where Jim Hightower lives and Sherrod Brown lives and all of us live is not flyover country. They're real people with real problems, and we talk to them as adults. And we say, you're 58 years old, you lost your job, you ought to be able to buy into Medicare if you want. You don't think that's popular? Of course it is. But we couldn't get that through a Republican Senate by a long shot, right? So a lot of these things are popular if you talk about the issue, connect them to the candidates later. But talk about these issues and push them, and that's how you win in more red state America, I think.
And but the good news is that's happening. That's what George Gale and the People's Action Group is doing in 30-something states that they're active in. That's what the Georgia Voters Project is. You just don't go to voters in the last 6 weeks of a campaign. You go to them right now. And you're talking about what's on their mind and trying to connect that to some sort of progressive policy that would actually make a difference in their lives. And I think, I think that's a big issue. Let me just finish this one thought.
Okay,
I sorry to interrupt you, but that people want to know that some difference could be made. I mean, issues are one thing, but nothing happens. How do we make it happen?
Yeah, you do. I mean, I think Biden understands. There's an article I read by a guy named for Vox by a guy named David Roberts, and he said the article fundamentally says Joe Biden needs to do big things right up front, right at the beginning. Right. You remember Obama did some big things, but it was one after another, and the interest groups came in and pushed back each time. If we do big things quickly, and like the overtime rule, like Medicare at 55, like helping students with student debt. We do some things, the earned income tax credit. So low income people get a $250 check every month from the government. We do those kinds of things early. What I look to is by summer, like you said, the last 3 months, summer of 2022, a whole lot of voters are going to say, I voted for Joe Biden and Gene Sheehan in New Hampshire. I voted for Joe Biden and Reverend Warnock in Georgia, and my life got better. I mean, imagine that. If we can do things and remind people of them, and then show and people understand my life got better, I'm going to vote this time. Because the reason we lose off-year elections is not that an Obama voter becomes a Republican. It's that an Obama voter in 2010 or 2014 just thought, my life didn't get enough better. Why bother voting? So exactly. We've got to give people a stake. And you voted for Biden, and your life actually got better. And here's how. And I'm going to tell my neighbors that, and that's going to matter. And it's going to make me more of an activist in the future.
Well, that's real politics, right? And that is how politics actually ought to work. I mean, and that's how the Republicans stay in it, because they deliver to the corporate elites and the moneyed interests, and so they support them. They pour money in, and et cetera.
We want you to sit back and listen to this AmericasDemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats. But we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to AmericasDemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.
Social Security measure. I believe that we must pass legislation to provide medical care.
This is our tradition. When our grandparents came to America, it was the Democratic Party which said, welcome. It was the Democratic Party, the party of Roosevelt and Truman and Kennedy and others, who said that America belonged to all its people, not just a handful of the rich or a few giant corporations. That's why great leaders like FDR fought so hard for Social Security, and why JFK stood up to the insurance companies and their Republican allies to get Medicare. It's not just one thing, or one time, in one place. It's about a whole history of standing up to the Republicans and saying someone has to be on the side of regular working people in America, whether it's defending Social Security or just the way your loved ones are treated on the job. That's what the Democratic Party is all about. And that's why this message has been brought to you by the Democratic Party. Working people like you and me.
Paid for by 21st Century Democrats. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. This is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. You're listening to Jim Hightower and Senator Sherrod Brown. We'll have more of that conversation in just a moment. But right now, we turn back to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
With chaos in Washington, worsening climate disasters, more wars than we can count, and a wobbling economy here at home, the last thing we need is another big challenge. But look out, here comes a doozy. It's AI, artificial intelligence, the fast-evolving science of autonomous machines that can think, learn, and even reproduce themselves. Consider self-driving vehicles. Once the stuff of science fiction, the future is suddenly upon us, with Google, Daimler, and GM rolling out driverless taxis, commercial trucks, and even cars with no steering wheel or gas and brake pedals. An army of corporate lobbyists is rushing to legislative halls, literally changing the rules of the road to allow full deployment of these vehicles. What about the hundreds of thousands of professional drivers who will lose their jobs? Not our problem, say the financiers and AI barons who will profit from a mass botmobile conversion. Besides, as one AI champion coldly asserts, those drivers get sick, take vacations, etc. People are messy, he notes. Machines are straightforward. Indeed, so straightforward that these 2-ton, non-sentient drivers will be driving straight at a world of defenseless pedestrians. Already, one of Uber's experimental cars killed an Arizona pedestrian last year. We can fix that, says Andrew Ng, a prominent AI investor. They just have to be reprogrammed. By they, Ng doesn't mean the self-driving machines. He means we pedestrians must be reprogrammed. Please be lawful, he scolds, and please be considerate of the computer-driven vehicles. No jaywalking, obey pedestrian signs, give right-of-way to the new technology. This is Jim Hightower saying, so don't just prepare yourself for a brave new world of automation. Prepare to be re-educated so you can interact properly with machines and don't get in their way.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. And now we continue with a conversation with Jim Hightower and Senator Sherrod Brown, originally posted to the podcast Hightower Chat and Chew. We pick up on a discussion about how progressive Democrats can connect with voters in flyover country.
Let's talk about going where you are and how you go out in the state of Ohio into areas that Trump wins. I called it flyover country, but it's really largely rural areas, and the media has cast rural America as Trump country, as white. But it's much more complex than that, and the needs in those areas are the needs that are in every area, which is healthcare, decent income, opportunities for their children, et cetera.
And it's making people see who's on your side and making the contrast between what McConnell and his corporate elite do and what those of us that fight for progressive politics do. I mean, Emerson said politics the history is a battle between the conservators and the innovators. The conservators want to hold under their privilege, and the innovators want to do what you want to do, want to move the country forward. And I think we need to show every day that we're on their side, and that Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump, I mean, he's going to be gone, but Mitch McConnell always, every time he gets a chance, they want to privatize Medicare. They want to privatize Social Security. They want to cut back on unemployment insurance. And we make the contrast. We're the party that stands up on Medicare, stands up on Social Security, stands up for unemployed workers to get that weekly $600 a week check. And that's as good a message in rural America as it is in small cities and big metro areas, because people care about social insurance. They care about Medicare. They care about Medicaid. They care about Social Security. They care about unemployment insurance. And we're the party that fights for that. But how often do you see now Democrats saying, McConnell and that group wants to privatize Medicare and Social Security. We're going to stand strong on it. And that you make that contrast, you win elections.
But we actually have to be out there, and the National Democratic Party is not out there. They're counties with no Democratic presence whatsoever. I think the National Party with its funders ought to have, even if it's a one-person office in every county in America, they ought to put somebody out there. So we're talking to people and bringing these real policies of change. Farmers, you're on the agriculture committee, and you've stood tall for farmers. I know something about, and I followed that. But our party has not. We've basically gone to the countryside, to farmers, and said, well, we're not as bad as Trump. That's not a big selling point with a dirt farmer who's out there with a mortgage and out there with a debt on the farm, out there facing seed companies that are monopolies, facing bankers that are monopolists, lenders that are facing then the big meat, Tyson and Smithfield and et cetera. And so they're squeezed on both sides by monopolies. Shouldn't the Democrats be, and one of the first things that Biden should do is to push a farm program that says we're going to break the monopolies so that farmers and people in rural areas have a chance to make a go again. Yeah,
we farmers intuitively understand that, particularly if it's a second or third generation farm, they understand that they're not getting near they get a smaller and smaller part of the food dollar every year. What I spend at the grocery store, so little of that, it really does trickle down.
They're down to 15 cents. 15 cents.
It's down to 15 cents. And probably the years you and I were born, Jim, some decades ago, it was 3 times that, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's clear that this system, I mean, I talk a lot about the dignity of work, and the dignity of work is whether you punch a clock or swipe a badge or work for a tip or work as a farmer. And we don't respect if the word respect is defined in part by how much you're paid, how much your benefits are, how you're treated at work, all those things. And farmers don't get the respect in terms of making a living that they used to, nor do factory workers, nor do workers in much of anywhere in this country because it so often flows to the top, as you know.
Yeah, it's like a job, just exactly like you're saying. The Republican, Trump came out and said, "Wow, I've created all these jobs." But you could go to any town in America and talk to a waitress, and she'd say, "Yeah, I've got 3 jobs,
Right. Yep.
but I don't have an income."
Yeah, that's right.
So that's the issue, and that's the issue with farmers as well. So really, rural areas and urban areas have the same issues. And we've got to build that bridge to saying we understand the needs of both of those. I understand from Deanna that we have some people who want to comment here. Deanna, speak to us.
Well done. Well, y'all have ESPN because you answered the first question I was going to ask. But I do, because there was, what should we address first? Farmers and getting everybody on the same page. Amen to that. I do want to shout out where some of our audience is watching from. We've got Loudon, Tennessee, Amarillo, Texas, San Diego, Massachusetts, Columbus, Nebraska, Floyd, Virginia, Indiana, South Georgia, Iowa City. I could go on and on, but we're really talking to folks from every part of the country and not just, these typical places that get all the attention when it's politically convenient. So what other kind of priorities are you thinking about, and how are y'all thinking about building that bridge, doing that work? What are some of the ideas coming out?
Well, let me answer it. Let me answer it in this way, Deanna, that we started something in Ohio in 2019. We call it our Canary Candidate Program. And it's based on this pen I wear. You can't really see it very well. I assume was given to me at a Workers' Day, Memorial Day rally, where the mine worker used to take the canary down in the mines. If the canary died, the mine worker got out of the mines. He knew he had no union strong enough to protect him. He had no government that cared enough to protect him. And we started this program with local candidates for city council and village council and township trustee and school board and state legislature and county office, and began to work with them and help them. Most of them had never been candidates before and didn't know how to do this. And the beauty of that, in part, is, first of all, a number of them won. But it also, my favorite Abraham Lincoln quote was, "I got to go out and get my public opinion bath." And these local candidates are they're going to the local Grange, or they're going to the local diner, they're going to work in a small town or in a big city, and people that often don't have voices talk to them. And that's where a lot of these ideas come from. And so one of the early things we're going to do, if we win Georgia, is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Another one of the early things we'll do is the PRO Act, protecting our right to organize. 70% of America now believes and has positive views about unions, and more than half of America would join a union if they had the chance. So all of those things are important. And it's the whole idea is you empower people, whether they're rural, whether they're urban, whether they're metro, whether they're small town. And our government doesn't think about that often enough. And it's up to Hightower and me and others to make sure the Biden people are thinking about it front and center.
Well, and that's what we've got to put forward is the notion that we can actually all come together and do something about this, but only if we actually take action. There's an old saying that you can't herd cats, but anyone who says you can't herd cats never tried a can opener. They will come. And
I've never heard that one from you, Jim.
And our can opener are those values of economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all people. That's all Americans want.
Yep.
Really. I mean, every issue comes down to that. But we've got to push that, and we have to push. I know you've got a little more faith in Biden than I do, but okay, let's see. I mean, there he is. We want him to succeed, so let's push from the outside and say all of us cats are coming in here and saying, we want fairness, we want justice, we want opportunity. And that's we in the rural areas, and that's we in the inner cities, civil justice reform, anti-monopoly, et cetera. People really want big change. And I guess that's one thing. I think that's what I'm babbling around here to try to say to you is that this is a time when people know that it's not working, and they don't want incrementalism and little dings here and there. They want fundamental change that gets us back to those concepts of fairness and justice and opportunity.
Well, I think the importance of your show is that people do want big change. And number two is how much all of America has in common across racial lines, across urban and rural areas. That I think this whole half hour has been about how people, whether it's Social Security or Medicare, whether it's wages, whether it's healthcare, that rural people and urban people want so much of the same things. And I'm just, we had a president for 4 years that just divided us always on everything, making this group hate that group and this group question the integrity of that group. And we will see something different now in tone, and it's up to us to make sure that the change is big. So we'll do this again, Jim. I appreciate this.
Well, let me ask you one more thing, final thing, and that is about the U.S. Senate, of which you are.
Yep.
Udall, Senator Udall, didn't run this. He resigned. Basically, he didn't resign. He retired. But he made a pretty scathing assessment of what it's like to be in the Senate. It seems to me, of course, I'm from a state that's got Ted Cruz, who has the worst beard in America, by the way, but that's another topic. But Ted Cruz and people like that, we got too many 5-watt bulbs sitting in 100-watt sockets in there. Can the Senate work? Can we? I know a lot of people who might be potential Senate candidates who would say, I don't want to go there.
Well, it could work. It's Mitch McConnell is first of all, if we win the 2 Georgia races, I think you're going to see a Senate, even though it'll be 50-50 or 51-50 with the vice president. You will see things happen. You'll see some big things happen. But with McConnell there, it's what interest group can you help today? And that's what McConnell's all about. In the Senate, right. The Senate does nothing that doesn't help his corporate friends. And to me, the worst kind of politician next to an outright crook is one born into privilege, and they think that their job is to help the privilege get more privilege. And that's what with McConnell and with all the spineless people around him, all the other Republican senators, including your 2 from Texas, they enable him to, every time there's a fork in the road, corporate interests or workers, it's corporate interests, and it's making the wealthy more rich and making the powerful more powerful. And that's what the Senate is. It doesn't have to be. It's not the Senate rules. It's who's there and who's in the majority.
We got to build that grassroots power that creates more Sherrod Browns to go to the Senate, as you did when you were 15 years old or whenever it was that you first went to the Senate. But anyway, but that's the change that we have to have. So there was a humorist at the turn of the last century named Ken Hubbard. And he once said that every now and then an innocent person gets sent to the legislature. And that's what I think we have with Sherrod Brown. So we appreciate you, and we're going to keep in touch with you and follow up on some of this.
I appreciate the work you do always.
Let's stay.
Thanks, buddy.
You too. Thank you, Sherrod.
Thanks, Dan.
Sherrod Brown, Senator from Ohio.
Thank you,
Thank you all for tuning in.
We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to keep the AmericasDemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, on the air, and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to AmericasDemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. And now, in his memory, our conversation with Don Fowler in the aftermath of the 2010 election. Last week, we lost a dear friend of 21st century Democrats and of progressive populist Democrats everywhere, but particularly in the South. Don Fowler, who served on our advisory board, passed away at the age of 85. As chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party and then as Democratic National Committee, he worked relentlessly to bring African Americans and whites together in the party to improve the lives of working people. Not surprisingly, he's also the person who first introduced President-elect Biden and South Carolina Congressman Jim Clyburn to each other. Back in 2010, Don Fowler was one of the very first guests on this podcast, and during that interview, he offered an analysis of Democratic messaging that is as insightful now as it was then. Don Fowler, former national chairman of the Democratic National Committee, joining us today on americasdemocrats.org netcast. Don, thank you very much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be with you, Jim. It's always enjoy talking about politics.
I know you do, and you've had a long career in it, and we're going to pick your brain a little bit about it. We're going to start with probably not the fondest of memories, and that's the 2010 election. The Democrats shellacking, president's word for that, this year. Is it due to a weak stance by Obama and the White House? Were the Democrats too liberal under Speaker Pelosi? I mean, what do you think on that?
If I had to identify one element in the play leading up to the election, it was that the Republicans had a much better message formulation and message delivery process than Democrats. They really did have a concept of what they wanted to do, and they had good tactics in how they were going to deliver that message, and they had great persistence. And in a word, their tactic was to be against everything that the Obama people wanted, claiming that it was too much government, increased spending and or taxes, and they didn't like either of those. And they just convinced a major part of the American people, and in particular, a major proportion of the independents, that they were right and we were wrong, and that we were leading the American people down the primrose path to Hades. I think that's it. There are a lot of details, but I think that's the essence of why we lost. We lost control of the message. We didn't appear to be leaders. We seemed to have more concern for our own political strategy rather than any sort of broad concern with the benefits and well-being of the American people.
You know, the DNC spent...
I don't think that... Let me say this. I don't think that is in any way reflective of reality. But in terms of message formulation and message delivery, that's the world we lived in the 2010 elections.
Well, that's something I've never understood is why wasn't that message turned around and showing off some of the benefits of healthcare reform and the reason why we needed the stimulus that we need. I mean, why did that let that fight go on?
I think you lay the blame at the feet of the people in the White House who led that effort, and I think that they somehow lived in a world of denial that the American people wouldn't buy that pitch, and therefore they didn't seem to have a will or the imagination to provide a countervailing force. It's got to be limitations and shortcomings on the part of the White House, and I don't know why that was the case. It might have been arrogance. It might have been that they were too concerned about the technicalities of some of the programs. They might have taken the cooperation of the Democrats in Congress and the goodwill of the American people for granted. But for whatever one of those reasons, the White House, I think, clearly bears the primary blame for that. I think Nancy Pelosi did a magnificent job in the House, and under great difficulty, I think Harry Reid did the same in the Senate.
The DNC spent a ton of money to increase the turnout for voters, and as we've seen in previous midterm elections, and a lot of those that would have helped President Obama, they're not the types that vote in midterm elections. That, despite the efforts of the DNC, why do they stay home? I mean, what do you do to energize that part of the voting public?
Well, first of all, the turnout is always lower in midterm elections than in presidential elections. I do believe that we could have had a larger turnout, which would have resulted in more Democrats being elected. But the DNC, in terms of what it did, I thought did a very credible job. They raised a lot more money than Republicans did, by tens of millions of dollars. They put that money into races which they thought that we could win, and I think that their judgments on the whole were as good as could have been had in the context. But what they were doing was trying to increase or sustain a big turnout among Democrats and independents when they didn't have any emotional or inspirational or issue help or guidance from the White House. They were doing all of the mechanical things right, but they were doing it in a headwind, and it just didn't work. In order to get a big turnout, as was the case in 2008, there was lots of money, good organization, and a great spirit and a great message. We had lots of organization, good money, but we didn't have that inspiration in 2010.
We're speaking with Don Fowler, former national chair of the Democratic National Committee. Don, the Tea Party obviously made a big splash this time around. Did it weaken or strengthen the Democratic Party, and is it a formidable group heading into 2012?
I think the Tea Party, in general, helped the Republicans and caused us some losses. There are, as we all know, 3 or 4 cases where the Tea Party candidate won in the primary, and they had nominated people that were unelectable in the general election, and that probably saved the majority for the Democrats in the Senate. And I'm talking about Delaware, to a lesser extent, Colorado, and of course Nevada. Those 3 cases clearly were incidences where the Tea Party helped us. But in general, and particularly in the House races, I think what they did was engender a great deal of enthusiasm for Republicans, and they had the edge on enthusiasm. They had the edge on emotion and energy, and it was largely due to the Tea Party, and we couldn't match that for reasons which I've already mentioned.
But is it enough to carry? I mean, is there enough enthusiasm from the Tea Party to head into 2012 that Democrats need to be concerned?
Well, I think the Democrats need to do something that will win back the independents. I don't think we're going to ever win many of the Tea Party people. They're just too far over on the kooky right for them to even consider being the Democrats. But where we lost was with the independents, and I think that how we still control the White House and the Senate, as you know. How we control and manage the economy in particular over the next 18 months or 2 years will determine whether President Obama is reelected and whether we hold the Senate and win back some of the losses in the House. I think we can do that, but we have to have something similar to the turnaround that President Clinton experienced and led in 95 and 96 to do that. We just can't sit back and let the world coast along and think we're going to win. But let me raise another question from a little different angle, Jim, if I may.
Sure.
a lot of the Tea Party anger and angst is a structural change that has taken place in our economy, in that the middle class is shrinking and becoming less viable in terms of the future. They are frustrated because either they don't have jobs or they're working for less than they used to, and it's a real fear. And I think there are millions of Americans who fear this, who feel this, and I think a lot of the people who are active in the Tea Party movement are there simply out of frustration and even fright. We Democrats have got to change the force and the flow of the economy, and we've got such a mammoth concentration of wealth in the very rich, and it's drained the wealth and the ability of the of the middle class to live a comfortable life. And we've got to do something economically and structurally to change that, or we're going to be in trouble not only for 2012, but for years after. That is something that Democrats should recognize and we should focus on, and we simply haven't addressed that as yet.
And Don, before we let you get away, does President Obama, is the party fractured to the point where he'll see a primary challenge for 2012?
I hope not. I don't think anybody could successfully challenge him. There is a fairly extensive record in the 20th century of people challenging incumbent presidents who are eligible to run again, and none of them, from Teddy Roosevelt to George H.W. Bush, none of them has ever lost a nomination. Most of them have lost a general election, but incumbent presidents can always get the nomination, but when they get challenged for the nomination, they frequently lose the general election. The only person in the 20th century out of about 5 or 6 cases where the incumbent, having been challenged in the nominating process, won the general election was Harry Truman in 48. So I hope we don't have a challenge to President Obama. I think that would be very destructive of party unity. I think President Obama and the Democrats in Congress can turn the corner and achieve a better record. And I clearly think that he can win re-election in 2012. I don't despair of that, but we certainly do have a lot of work to do between now and then.
And fortunately, we've got 2 years to do it. Don Fowler, former national chairman of the Democratic National Committee, we appreciate your time with us today, Don, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Neil.
From February 2010, our conversation with Don Fowler. And that's all for the America's Democrats podcast. Thank you to all who made today's show possible, Jim Hightower and Senator Sherrod Brown. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook and Twitter, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. For the America's Democrats podcast, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us. Support the americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.